We open with Batman sitting in the cave, fully suited up, looking defeated, tired, almost sulking. Naturally, when Alfred asks, "Are you alright?" Batman responds with, "I'm tired, Alfred." You can tell this isn't a response due to a long night of crime fighting, as Kevin Conroy carries the somber tone of defeat in his voice. What Batman later admits to Alfred sets the tone for what is to come throughout the episode. A weary body can be dealt with, but a weary spirit, that's something else. You can tell that Batman here is yet to find the answers to how he's feeling. This is really hit home when he is handed a newspaper of Cobblepot, or the Penguin, having his conviction overturned. AKA he isn't spending any time behind bars. You know that our boy Bats has had a hand in apprehending him. The feelings we, the audience, and Batman share is all that hard work for nothing, mixed in with what else do you expect in Gotham, sprinkled with disappointment. What we are met with is Batman's response to those feelings, his doubts as if he is even doing a good job as the Dark Knight. Alfred's response is a natural response, which us in the audience also share. What do you mean? You've saved countless lives, saved the city, blah blah blah. Batman's response makes it clear that it's not for the short-term victories or those effects that we can see immediately or observe right in front of us, like anything he has listed, but rather it is a long-term effect. The war, as he mentions. He's questioning, what has the Batman done for the mission? The audience is hit with the motivator behind this doubt. As the episode takes place, that night marks the anniversary his parents were taken away from him, that fateful night that set him on this journey to begin with. Alfred hands him roses as he heads off to Crime Alley, where that fateful night occurred. During this episode, we're introduced to this character called Whizzer, who outright gyps these businessmen walking past them on Gotham streets for some bus money. The fact that he's well groomed, warm, and clean looking gives off the vibe that he's getting by and not actually in need for the money, but rather this is how he makes his living, by scamming others. Whilst this is happening, Gordon, Bullock, and the rest of the GCPD are waiting outside this warehouse that is being held up by someone called the Jazzman, and for Batman to show up and give the signal. Batman, who's supposed to be at the raid with Gordon and the GCPD, instead meets with Leslie Tompkins, a longtime friend of the Bat family and who we know is one of the few people at this point in the series to know the true identity of the Batman. They engage in this philosophical discussion about letting go of the past versus obsession, being a fanatic, and losing sight of his goal. The way that this was written with one point of letting go versus Batman's 3 negative statements really show that his headspace and spirit is in a bad way. We later see Whizzer get jumped by 2 thugs who he owes money to, near Leslie and Batman at this point in time. Whizzer being tied up with the wrong people gives us a clue into who he really is and what he had to do to try and get by. What's even funnier is that it's over something insignificant like $50. Naturally, Batman is there to save the day. But one of the thugs he threw landed on the flowers he put down for Thomas and Martha. Now when I saw this I thought Batman was going to go apeshit on Whizzer, or even the guy that fell, but instead he lifts the unconscious body of said thug, and has a look of disgust and picks up the flowers. This paired with Whizzer saying thanks for your help, but I don't need help from some jerk in long underwear, not only fired off my protective instincts, but showed me that this kid is some ungrateful little shit that normal people would rightfully say he doesn't deserve any help that comes his way. But our boy Bats is better than that, and that's why he's in the cape and we aren't. The guy even asked Leslie if there's room for Whizzer at the shelter, like the stand-up guy he is. While we are focused on stupid Whizzer, Gordon and the GCPD decide to raid the Jazzman warehouse without Batman as it's been too long. Although Batman shows up moments later and does his usual Cape Crusader things, like gas pellets to neutralize thugs, we're so caught up in the usual consistency of Batman kicking butt that we're distracted by the fact that Gordon gets caught in the crossfire and needs to undergo intensive surgery as a consequence of Batman being late. Even though they caught Jazzman, there's no real time to celebrate the victory. The thing is, Jazzman is a lower tier thug. He ain't no Joker, Penguin, or his usual rogues, just some guy who carries a gun and a violin case. Chump change for Batman usually, yet somehow this carried a huge L for Team Batman. At this point, Batman blames himself for taking the time to mourn his parents, holding on to this past. This started an existential crisis that led to fragility and vulnerability, and one of his closest friends in critical condition. A huge mistake that shouldn't have happened in his eyes, but in all honesty, could have happened to anyone. Barbara enters the room and represents the audience thoughts at this time, trying to console Batman for his guilt for Jim being in this condition he's in. But we're interrupted by the speaker of Batman's current thoughts, Detective Bullock, blaming him and supporting these ideas of how he's let everyone down. Batman didn't even try to stand up for himself. All he did was defeatedly tell Bullock, "I didn't know," before he leaves the room. No cold stare, nothing. We cut to 3 days later as Alfred calls Dick over to check up on Bruce. It seems that after Jim was hospitalized, he hadn't taken the cowl off nor he'd left the cave. It's clear that the guilt is still being carried within him, as his first words to Dick are still fixated on that incident. I should have been there. This time it's Dick's turn to see why he's being so hard on himself. And this time Dick is the spokesperson of the audience voice, basically saying that we're all thinking, alright, yeah, well, big deal. You can't be everywhere at once though, give yourself a break, Bats. That's when we are hit with the real reason of why this situation has stuck with him for so long. Bruce tells Dick that Jim is the same age as his father would have been if he hadn't died that night. Could you make the case that Jim is a father figure? Maybe, but I think the point here is that there's a strong bond here and it carries more weight that he is hurt from his actions, which he could have avoided in his eyes. As they walk around the cave, we see Batman start to spiral, his spirit broken and really in the lowest point in his morale in the series thus far. He begins projecting his demise and his downfall by the hands of various nemesis, or even some lucky punk. It's at this point Dick is pleading to Bruce to try and console him, but Batman hears none of it. He can't see the good that the mission brings anymore, and instead is fixated on the idea of letting others down due to his actions. His thoughts about taking the ultimate sacrifice of anything happening to him instead of others is portrayed as selfless, but the guilt carries on. That's how he sees it, and there's nothing anyone else can say to change it. Up to this point, the actions of Batman have been critiqued and questioned by Bruce himself, yet he chooses to move on in the spirit of the Batman. How the symbol is meant to be Gotham's protector, the Dark Knight, but we see earlier in the episode that there are cliches of tourism, bat paraphernalia everywhere, and that's how he views it now. The crusade has lost its meaning, and Bruce has lost the meaning of continuing. It's at this point he throws the cowl into the depths of the cave, saying maybe it was better if he didn't carry on at all. It's clear that he's given up. With Dick returning from visiting Barbara and Jim in the hospital, his feelings of remorse and trying to console Bruce have turned into frustration and anger. His conversation with Barbara calls for something to be done. The man who put Jim in hospital has escaped. That's usually more than enough of a sign for Bruce to slap on a cape and cowl before anything worse happens, but instead he's sitting in his dressing gown reading some papers. Not in the cave as Batman, but upstairs in the manor as Bruce, which we hardly see during this time. Desensitized by the crime that is waiting to happen, an actual threat on Jim's life with Jazzman returning to finish the job. It's where Dick drops the truth bomb on Bruce, saying the most important lesson is to never give up, and dons on the bright yellow and red, and decides to head out on his own to stop Jazzman. I don't know about any of you, but I was thinking that Robin was gonna mess this up, even though he's a regular guy with a gun and a violin case. Then bam, we're hit with Batman the Animated Series theme, as Bruce has regained his confidence back as Batman and stops him, and tells him that this is his fight. As we cut to Jazzman knocking out the window washer with a mop, uses the rig to climb up to Jim's room and prepare to shoot him with a pistol. Batman throws a batarang. Bullock arrives and watches on, Babs being totally useless by throwing the sheet over the window as Jazzman breaks through the window and lies to the side of Jim's unconscious body yelling no. And Batman stopping him in this epic slow motion scene with Jim waking up. The beauty of Jim waking up is the convenient pep talk to Batman saying to never stop fighting, telling him that he wishes he was a hero when he was younger, identifying with the struggles that he had gone through the past few days while he was in this critical condition of this doubt and negativity that Batman has been facing. As for Whizzer, Batman turned his life around and he's now leaving Gotham to start a new honest life somewhere, which is a nice neat little bow to wrap up the episode. Before we go, I wanted to preface that this was my opinion on a really well written episode of the great series. I know that there are many instances where he might have had worse times where he does actually give up or he gets his back broken, but I wanted to provide my opinion in a different take. Everything from the close to heart doubts we would have faced at one point in our lives, to other characters being the voice of the audience and share our thoughts, or advice we might have heard not getting through to us really mimics what it's like to experience this in real life. I liked how in the end it took an intrinsic motivation to realize that, yes, Batman made a mistake or was feeling bad, went through the process of experiencing those emotions, but got back on his feet on his own accord, with the help of those in his support network, and got back to kicking ass. Thank you for listening to my rant. If you stayed this long, please consider subscribing and liking the video, as I have more Batman the Animated Series content, as well as some other stuff coming in the pipeline. Please share your opinions in the comments section and talk about it. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say.